Oh, come on, Riley. You're not seriously still working at that pathetic little coffee shop, are you? My sister Vanessa's voice cut through the Christmas morning chatter like a blade through silk. I'm Riley Hartwell. I'm 31 years old, and while my family thinks I've been serving lattes and wiping down tables for the past 3 years in Millbrook Heights, I've actually been Agent Hartwell, FBI Organized Crime Task Force. But sitting there on Christmas morning, watching my sister smirk at what she thought was my failure, I had to bite my tongue and remember my cover. Have you ever had to stay silent while someone you love tears you apart, knowing that one word from you could shatter their entire world? Tell me in the comments, because what happened next changed everything between us forever. The living room of our childhood home in Oakenford smelled like cinnamon rolls and smugness. My parents, Dr. Patricia Hartwell and Professor James Hartwell, had decorated every surface with their usual perfectionist touch. Crystal ornaments caught the morning light, casting rainbow reflections across family photos that lined the mantelpiece. Photos where I increasingly felt like a stranger looking in. Vanessa sat curled in the oversized leather armchair that used to be Dad's, wearing a cream cashmere sweater that probably cost more than most people's rent, her engagement ring catching the light like a small spotlight on her success. I mean, honestly, Vanessa continued, unwrapping another expensive gift from her fiancé Preston, when are you going to get serious about your life? I'm about to make partner at Kensington Myers and Associates. Preston just bought us that penthouse in downtown Riverside, and you're still, what, memorizing coffee orders? She laughed, but it wasn't the warm laugh I remembered from our childhood. This was the practiced laugh of someone who'd learned to weaponize her amusement. I forced a smile and took another sip of my coffee. Ironically, really good coffee that I had brought from Millbrook Heights. The grindhouse keeps me busy, I said quietly, using the name of the cover business that had been my second home for 3 years. What I didn't mention was that the grindhouse was a front operation strategically positioned 3 blocks from the headquarters of the Torino crime family, and that every regular customer I served was actually a high-level mobster whose conversations I'd been recording for the biggest RICO case in the state's history. Mom looked up from her crossword puzzle, her reading glasses perched on her nose in that way that made her look exactly like the literature professor she was. Riley, sweetheart, your sister has a point. You graduated summa cum laude with Westfield University with a degree in criminal justice. Surely there are better opportunities out there than food service. Her voice carried that particular blend of love and disappointment that only mothers can master. Dad nodded from behind his newspaper, the Oakenford Chronicle rustling as he turned the page. When I was your age, I was already 3 years into my tenure-track position. Your mother had just finished her master's thesis. We were building something. He peered over his glasses at me. What exactly are you building, sweetheart? What was I building? How about a federal case that would dismantle the largest organized crime syndicate in the tri-state area? How about a reputation within the Bureau that had earned me commendations from the director himself? How about expertise in undercover operations that had taken down drug traffickers, money launderers, and human traffickers across 4 different states? But Agent Riley Hartwell couldn't say any of that. Coffee shop Riley had to sit there and take it. I'm figuring things out, I said, the words tasting like ash in my mouth. It was the same response I'd given for 3 years, watching my family's respect for me erode a little more each time we gathered. Vanessa snorted delicately. She'd even learned to snort with class. Figuring things out. At 31? Riley, I figured things out at 25 when I passed the bar exam. Some of us can't afford to drift through life serving overpriced beverages to hipsters. The irony was suffocating. Those hipsters included Vincent Torino Jr., whose father ran numbers from here to Atlantic City. There was also Maria Santos, who laundered money through 7 different shell companies that I'd been tracking for 18 months. And then there was Danny the Fish Marconi, who'd bragged to me just last week about a weapons shipment coming in through the port of Riverside. Every conversation, every seemingly casual interaction, every "would you like room for cream" was actually intelligence gathering that would put these people behind bars for the rest of their lives. But to my family, I was just Riley who couldn't get her act together. Preston cleared his throat. He always cleared his throat before saying something he thought was important. "You know, Riley, I could put in a word for you at my firm. We're always looking for good administrative assistants. It's not glamorous, but it's a step up from—" He gestured vaguely in my direction, as if I were a problem to be solved. I felt something crack inside my chest. Administrative assistant. From the man who was marrying my sister, who thought the best I could aspire to was answering phones and filing papers. If only he knew that last month I'd testified before a federal grand jury, or that I'd spent 6 weeks in specialized training at Quantico learning advanced surveillance techniques. I forced a smile and took another sip of my coffee. Ironically, really good coffee that I'd brought from Millbrook Heights. "The grindhouse keeps me busy," I said quietly, without mentioning the fact that each time I handed the Torino crime family boss his morning coffee, I was also passing off tapes of conversations by numerous mob bosses. And then I managed another forced smile and promised that Preston would take his word to the law firm into consideration. Vanessa leaned forward, her eyes bright with what she probably thought was sisterly concern, but looked more like predatory satisfaction. "Really, Riley, at some point you have to ask yourself, is this who you want to be? The family disappointment? The one who never quite figured it out? The one we all worry about?" She reached over and patted my hand like I was a stray dog she felt sorry for. "I just want better for you. We all do." The family disappointment. The words hit me like a physical blow. If only they knew that 3 weeks ago, I'd prevented a shipment of heroin worth $12 million from hitting the streets of Riverside. If only they knew that my coffee shop job had led to the arrests of 17 people involved in human trafficking. If only they knew that the FBI director had personally called me into his office to commend my work on the Torino investigation. But they didn't know, because they couldn't know, because my cover was more important than my ego, because the case I'd been building for 3 years was finally ready to break wide open, and nothing, not even my family's respect, could jeopardize that. So I sat there, in the living room where I'd opened Christmas presents as a child, where I'd learned to ride a bike and done homework at the kitchen table, and I let my sister's words wash over me like acid rain. I smiled and nodded and played the part of disappointed Riley, the family failure, the one who served coffee while her sister conquered the legal world. But deep down, I knew something they didn't. In exactly 4 days, everything was going to change. Because in 4 days, the Torino takedown was scheduled to happen. And when it did, the whole world would know exactly who Riley Hartwell really was. I just had to survive Christmas first. The afternoon unfolded like a carefully choreographed humiliation. After opening presents, where Vanessa received a diamond tennis bracelet from Preston, and I got a motivational book about career changes from Mom, the extended family began arriving for Christmas dinner. The house filled with the sound of expensive heels clicking across hardwood floors and the rustle of designer coats being hung in the front closet. Aunt Caroline swept in first, her silver hair perfectly styled despite the December wind outside. Behind her came Uncle Richard, followed by my cousins David and Amanda, both successful doctors like half our family seemed to be. Then came the Westbrook family, longtime family friends whose daughter Emma had just been promoted to senior associate at some prestigious law firm in Manhattan. The dining room had been transformed into something that belonged in a magazine spread. Mom's grandmother's china gleamed under the crystal chandelier, and the mahogany table could have seated a small army. Gold-rimmed glasses caught the candlelight, casting warm shadows across faces that all seemed to glow with the confidence that comes from knowing exactly where you belong in the world. I found myself seated between 10-year-old cousin Timothy and Grandma Rose, who was 93 and had the hearing of someone half her age when she wanted to eavesdrop on conversations. Vanessa, naturally, held court at the other end of the table, positioned perfectly between Dad and Uncle Richard, where every word she spoke could be appreciated by the maximum number of people.
"So, Emma," Mom said, cutting into her perfectly prepared prime rib, "tell us about this new position. Senior associate at 28, that's quite an accomplishment." Emma, blonde and polished in the way that screamed Ivy League education and trust fund, smiled modestly. "It's been a wonderful opportunity. Corporate litigation keeps me busy, but I love the challenge. Last month, I helped settle a multi-million-dollar merger dispute." "Brilliant," Dad beamed, raising his wine glass. "To the next generation of achievers." Everyone raised their glasses except me. I was still nursing my first glass of wine, needing to keep my head clear out of professional habit. 3 years of undercover work had trained me to always stay alert, always be ready to remember details, always be prepared for anything. "And David," Aunt Caroline chimed in, "how's the residency going? Surgery, wasn't it?" My cousin David, who had always been the golden boy, even when we were kids, straightened up with practiced humility. "Cardiothoracic surgery at Riverside General. It's demanding, but saving lives, there's nothing quite like it." He glanced around the table, soaking up the admiring looks. "Just last week, I assisted on a heart transplant. 22-year-old patient. She's going to live a full life now because of what we did." More murmurs of appreciation rippled around the table, more wine glasses raised, more beaming smiles from the parents and relatives who had so much to be proud of. Then Uncle Richard, who had had perhaps one too many glasses of Dad's expensive Cabernet, turned his attention down the table. "And Riley," he announced, his voice carrying that particular jovial tone people use when they're about to say something they think is funny but really isn't. "How's the coffee business treating you? Still mastering the art of foam designs?" A ripple of polite laughter traveled around the table. Even Grandma Rose chuckled into her wine glass. "Actually," I started, but Vanessa was already jumping in. "Oh, Riley's become quite the expert," she said, her voice dripping with sisterly affection that felt like poison honey. "She can tell you the difference between a macchiato and a cappuccino with her eyes closed. Isn't that right, sis?" Preston nodded sagely, as if this was actually a valuable life skill. There's dignity in honest work. Not everyone can handle the pressure of high-stakes careers. The table fell into an uncomfortable silence. I could feel eyes on me, some pitying, some curious, some just embarrassed on my behalf. Little Timothy, bless him, was more interested in building a fortress out of his mashed potatoes than participating in my social execution.
"Riley's always been our free spirit," Mom said, clearly trying to rescue the situation, but somehow making it worse. "She marches to the beat of her own drum." Vanessa leaned back in her chair, wine glass in hand, surveying the table like a queen holding court. "You know what I find fascinating?" she said, her voice taking on that dangerous edge I remembered from childhood arguments. "We're sitting here celebrating Emma's promotion, David's surgical successes, Preston's latest case victory, and then there's Riley, who seems perfectly content to drift through life without any real ambition or drive." The words hung in the air like smoke from a fire. I felt my jaw clench involuntarily, a reaction I'd trained myself out of during undercover work, but family had a way of stripping away professional composure. "Vanessa," Dad warned gently, but she was just getting started. "No, really, I'm genuinely curious," she continued, her lawyer instincts kicking in as she built her case. "What's the long-term plan here, Riley? Are you going to be serving coffee when you're 40? 50? Do you have any retirement savings? Any health insurance that doesn't come from Mom and Dad?" Each question was a calculated strike designed to expose exactly how little my family understood about my real life. The irony was suffocating. I had federal health insurance, a pension plan that would make most people weep with envy, and enough saved to buy a house in cash if I wanted to blow my cover. But coffee shop Riley couldn't say any of that. "I'm doing fine," I managed, my voice steady despite the heat rising in my chest. "Fine," Vanessa repeated, tasting the word like it left a bad flavor in her mouth. Such a wonderfully ambitious word. Fine. She turned to address the table, playing to her audience. "You know what I was doing when I was 31? I was already 3 years out of law school, had made junior partner, was engaged to an amazing man, had bought my first investment property. I was building something, creating a legacy." She paused for effect, letting her words settle before delivering the final blow.
But hey, at least Riley makes a mean latte, right? The laughter that followed was worse than silence would have been. It was the sound of a family that loved me, but had given up on me. The sound of people who thought they were being kind by finding humor in what they saw as my failure to launch. Preston raised his glass with a smirk. To Riley, the family barista, may your foam art always be Instagram-worthy. Even Dad chuckled at that one. I sat there, fork halfway to my mouth, surrounded by the people who were supposed to love and support me unconditionally, and felt more alone than I had ever felt during 3 years of deep cover work. At least when I was infiltrating criminal organizations, I knew the people around me were the enemy. Here, these people loved me. They just had no idea who I actually was. And the worst part? Tomorrow I'd have to go back to the grindhouse, back to serving Vincente Torino Jr. his daily espresso, back to pretending to be exactly the person my family thought I was. Just 4 more days until the takedown. 4 more days until I could stop being their disappointment and start being their shock. The evening didn't get better. If anything, the post-dinner conversations felt like death by 1,000 cuts. Each comment carefully calibrated to remind me exactly where I stood in the family hierarchy. In the living room, while Mom served her famous apple pie and Dad poured brandy for the adults, the conversation naturally drifted to what everyone had accomplished this year. It was like an annual performance review, except I was the only one failing. Emma, didn't you say you were featured in that legal magazine? Aunt Caroline asked, settling into the burgundy armchair with her dessert. Emma blushed prettily, the kind of practiced modesty that comes from years of academic and professional validation. Just a small piece about young women in corporate law. Nothing major, really. Nothing major, Uncle Richard boomed. Caroline saw me the article. 2 full pages in National Legal Review. That's tremendous exposure for someone your age. The praise flowed around Emma like warm honey. Everyone wanted details about the interview, the photo shoot, the response from her colleagues. She handled the attention with graceful humility, deflecting compliments while somehow managing to share even more impressive details about her career trajectory. Then David launched into a story about being selected for a prestigious surgical fellowship that would take him to Johns Hopkins next year. Only 12 residents nationwide get chosen, he explained, though he didn't need to explain. The admiration on everyone's faces said it all. Incredible, Dad mused, swirling his brandy. Johns Hopkins, that's the kind of opportunity that changes a career trajectory permanently. Even Amanda, my youngest cousin, who was only 26, had been promoted to head of pediatric nursing at Millbrook General Hospital, the youngest department head in the hospital's history, she said shyly when pressed for details. Preston, not to be outdone, regaled everyone with his latest courtroom victory, a case that had been covered by the local news stations. The opposing counsel actually approached me afterwards, said it was the most brilliant cross-examination he'd seen in 20 years of practice. Vanessa beamed at her fiancé like he'd just solved world hunger. I'm so proud of him, she announced to the room, as if we all needed confirmation of Preston's amazingness. More gasps of appreciation, more raised glasses, more celebration of achievement and ambition, and the kind of success that our family valued above everything else. And through it all, I sat there quietly in the corner of the sectional sofa, invisible, except when someone remembered to include me in the conversation with a polite question that felt more like charity than genuine interest.
Riley, honey, Grandma Rose said during a lull in the achievement parade. What about you? Anything exciting happening at work? The question hung in the air, and I could feel the subtle shift in the room's energy. This was the obligatory check-in with the underachiever, the moment when everyone would politely listen to whatever mundane story I could come up with before moving on to more interesting topics. Well, I started, searching for something I could say that wouldn't blow my cover but might earn me a crumb of respect. We've been working on expanding our client base, building relationships with new customers, understanding their needs better.
It was technically true. I had been building relationships with new customers. I just couldn't mention that those customers were members of organized crime families and that understanding their needs involved wearing a wire and documenting their legal activities. "That's nice, dear," Grandma Rose said with a kind of gentle encouragement usually reserved for children's art projects. Uncle Richard nodded thoughtfully, clearly trying to find something positive to say. "Customer service is so important in the food industry. People remembered good service." "Absolutely," Mom chimed in, ever the supportive parent. "Riley has always been good with people. Even as a child, she could talk to anyone." The conversation was already moving on. I could see it in their faces, the polite interest fading, attention turning back toward more stimulating topics. Preston was launching into another legal anecdote, and Vanessa was preparing to share news about their wedding venue. But then Timothy, bless his 10-year-old heart, piped up from where he was playing on his tablet in the corner. "Aunt Riley, do you know how to make those drinks with the cool designs on top? The ones that look like flowers?" Finally, a question I could answer with some enthusiasm. "You mean latte art?" "Yes, I do. It takes a lot of practice, but once you get the technique down, you can make roses, hearts, even little animals." Timothy's eyes lit up. "That's so cool! Can you show me sometime?" Before I could answer, Vanessa laughed, that same sharp-edged laugh from earlier. "Timothy, sweetheart, that's very sweet. But Aunt Riley's artistic coffee skills probably aren't the most practical life lesson we could teach you." The dismissal was swift and surgical. Even my moment with Timothy, the one person who seemed genuinely interested in what I did, was cut short with a smile and a subtle reminder that my skills weren't worth learning. "I think it's creative," Timothy protested with the stubborn loyalty that only children possess. "Of course it is, honey," Vanessa said, ruffling his hair. "But when you're older, you'll understand that there are more important things to focus on, like your studies, building a career, making something of yourself." The implication was clear. Coffee art wasn't making something of yourself. By extension, I wasn't making something of myself. Dad tried to smooth things over. "Riley's always been artistic. Remember those paintings she used to do in high school? Very talented." "Yes," Mom agreed. "She had such potential in art. I always wondered what might have happened if she'd pursued that more seriously." More potential that I'd apparently wasted. More doors I'd supposedly failed to walk through. The conversation was becoming an archaeological dig through my abandoned dreams and missed opportunities. Amanda, probably trying to be helpful, suggested, "You know, Riley, you could probably take some business classes. Learn about restaurant management or hospitality. Turn your coffee experience into something bigger." "That's actually a great idea," Emma joined in, her voice bright with the enthusiasm of someone who'd found a way to make my situation into a project. "There are so many successful coffee shop chains. You could franchise, build a brand. Look at what Howard Schultz did with Starbucks." Suddenly, everyone was an expert on my career trajectory. Suggestions flew around the room like confetti. Business school, management training, entrepreneurship workshops. They meant well, I knew that. But every suggestion felt like another way of saying that what I was currently doing wasn't enough, wasn't worthy of respect, wasn't making them proud. Preston, ever the lawyer, started outlining a business plan. "You'd need to establish a unique selling proposition, identify your target demographic, develop a scalable model. Maybe you could specialize in organic, locally sourced ingredients. Health-conscious consumers are a growing market. Or focus on the experience, create a community space, host events, make it more than just a coffee shop." They were redesigning my entire life, transforming my supposed failure into a potential success story, and all I could do was sit there and nod while they planned out a future that had nothing to do with who I actually was or what I actually did. The worst part was watching Vanessa through all of this. She sat back with a satisfied smile, watching our family try to fix me, like I was a broken appliance that just needed the right repair manual. You know what? Vanessa said, finally, when the business suggestions had run their course. I think it's wonderful that everyone wants to help Riley figure out her next steps. It really shows how much we all care about her. She said it with such perfect sisterly affection that anyone listening would think she was being supportive, but I knew that tone. I had been hearing it since we were children. It was the tone she used when she wanted to sound generous while actually highlighting someone else's need for help. Riley's lucky to have such a supportive family. Not everyone has people willing to invest this much time and energy into helping them reach their potential. Their potential. Not my success, not my achievements, not my value as I currently existed, but my potential to become someone worthy of their pride. I excused myself to help Mom clear dessert plates, needing a moment away from the well-meaning assault on my life choices. In the kitchen, surrounded by the familiar sounds of running water and clinking dishes, I allowed myself a moment to feel the weight of their disappointment.
Tomorrow, I'd go back to the grindhouse. I'd serve Vincent Torino Jr. his daily espresso and listen to him complain about his father's old-fashioned business methods. I'd nod sympathetically while Maria Santos talked about her import business and pretend not to understand the significance of her coded phone conversations. I'd smile at Danny the fish Marconi when he made his crude jokes and act like I was too naive to understand what he was really talking about. And in 3 days, when the takedown happened, all of these people sitting in my parents' living room would see my face on the news. They'd see me standing next to federal agents wearing a bulletproof vest with FBI emblazoned across the front. They'd learn that their family disappointment had been instrumental in dismantling one of the most powerful criminal organizations in the region. But until then, I was just Riley, who served coffee and had so much unrealized potential. The final blow came during the family photo session, which, in the Hartwell household, was treated with the solemnity of a state occasion. Every Christmas, Mom arranged an elaborate photo shoot in front of the fireplace, complete with coordinated outfits and professional lighting that Dad had installed years ago when he decided amateur photography was beneath the family image. "Everyone gather around," Mom announced, positioning her antique camera on its tripod. She had inherited her grandmother's old Leica and insisted on using actual film because, as she always said, digital photos fade, but film captures souls. The choreography was always the same. Dad and Mom in the center, surrounded by their successful offspring and their equally successful spouses-to-be. Extended family arranged by height and importance, everyone positioned to showcase maximum happiness and prosperity. Vanessa naturally claimed the spot directly next to Mom, with Preston's arm wrapped around her waist like a declaration of victory. David and Amanda flanked Dad, their medical credentials somehow making them seem more legitimate in the family constellation. Emma positioned herself next to Uncle Richard, while Aunt Carolyn gathered Timothy close. I found myself hovering at the edge of the group, waiting for someone to tell me where I belonged in this carefully constructed tableau of success. "Riley, honey," Mom called, adjusting the camera settings, "could you just step back a tiny bit? You're casting a shadow on Vanessa." I moved back, but apparently not far enough. "A little more, sweetie. Perfect." I looked down and realized I was no longer in the frame at all. I was standing behind everyone, close enough to be included if someone squinted, but far enough back that the camera wouldn't catch me unless they specifically angled for it. "Actually," Vanessa said, turning to look at me with what appeared to be sisterly concern, "Riley, your shirt is a little wrinkled, and the color clashes with Mom's dress. Maybe you could change into something more coordinated." I looked down at my burgundy sweater, a perfectly nice sweater that I thought looked festive and appropriate.
But next to Vanessa's cream cashmere and Preston's charcoal gray suit, I suddenly felt like I was wearing a costume from the wrong play. "This is fine," I said quietly. "It's just a family photo." "Just a family photo?" Mom repeated, her voice taking on that particular tone that meant I'd said something disappointing. "Riley, these photos are going in the annual Christmas card. They're going to clients, colleagues, friends. They represent our family." The word represent hung in the air like an accusation, as if my wrinkled sweater and mismatched color palette would somehow undermine decades of family reputation. "I'll go change," I started to say, but Vanessa was already moving into action. "You know what?" she said brightly. "Why don't we take a few different shots? Some with the whole family, some with just the immediate family, some with the professional crowd." She gestured toward David, Amanda, Emma, and Preston. "That way we have options for different audiences." The suggestion sounded reasonable on the surface, but I could read between the lines. Different shots for different audiences meant photos where I could be strategically excluded depending on who would be receiving the Christmas card. "Great idea," Preston chimed in, adjusting his tie. "The partners at my firm always enjoy seeing family photos. It shows stability, values, success." Success. There was that word again, hovering over me like a thundercloud. Mom nodded thoughtfully. "Yes, that makes sense. Riley, why don't you step aside for the professional shots? We can include you in the casual family ones afterward." I felt something cold settle in my stomach. This wasn't about lighting or shadows or coordinated outfits. This was about packaging the family image, and I was apparently the element that needed to be edited out for public consumption. But I stepped aside because what else could I do? I watched my family arrange themselves into a picture-perfect representation of success and achievement. Vanessa's engagement ring caught the light as she positioned her hand just so. Preston's confident smile spoke of courtroom victories and six-figure bonuses. David and Amanda's medical credentials somehow seemed to radiate from their very posture. "Beautiful," Mom murmured from behind the camera. "This is going to be perfect for the holiday cards." They took shot after shot, different poses, different arrangements, but always the same cast of characters. The successful ones, the ones who made the family proud, the ones worth showing off to clients and colleagues and friends. I stood in the hallway, watching through the archway, feeling like a ghost in my own childhood home. "Okay," Mom said finally. "Now let's get some casual family shots with everyone." Everyone. The word should have included me, but somehow it felt like an afterthought. I rejoined the group, but the energy had shifted. The careful positioning was gone, replaced by relaxed poses and genuine smiles. This was the version for private consumption, the one that didn't need to meet professional standards. "Riley, stand next to Grandma Rose," Mom directed, and I found myself relegated to the far edge again, next to the one family member who couldn't see well enough to judge my outfit choices. But then, as Mom was adjusting the final camera settings, my phone buzzed with a text message. I glanced down instinctively. 3 years of undercover work had trained me to always check my phone immediately because you never knew when a case might take a critical turn. The message was from Agent Derek Morrison, my FBI handler. "Torino meeting moved up. Tomorrow 2 p.m. instead of Thursday. Be ready." My blood went cold. The takedown was happening tomorrow, not in 3 days. Tomorrow afternoon, while my family was still digesting Christmas dinner and planning their successful New Year's resolutions, I would be coordinating with federal agents to arrest some of the most dangerous criminals in the tri-state area. "Riley?" Mom's voice cut through my shock. "Can you please put your phone away? We're trying to take a family photo." I looked up to see 8 pairs of eyes staring at me with varying degrees of annoyance and disappointment. Here I was, being unprofessional even during family photo time, proving once again that I couldn't be counted on to do something as simple as stand still and smile. "Sorry." I mumbled, slipping the phone back into my pocket. But my hands were shaking slightly, and my mind was racing through the implications of the schedule change. "Everything okay?" Dad asked. And for a moment I heard genuine concern in his voice.
I looked at his face, at all their faces, and felt the weight of 3 years of lies settling on my shoulders. Tomorrow, everything would change. Tomorrow, they would know the truth about who I really was and what I'd really been doing all this time. But tonight, I was still their disappointment. "Just work," I said, which was technically true. Vanessa snorted. "Work texting on Christmas? How urgent can a coffee order be?" The laughter that followed was gentle, familial, the kind of teasing that's supposed to show affection, but it felt like being slowly drowned in honey. "Maybe it's about scheduling," Preston suggested helpfully. "I imagine the service industry has different priorities than traditional businesses." Different priorities, as if my world was somehow lesser, more trivial, less important than theirs. The camera flashed, capturing the moment forever. But as I stood there smiling for the lens, I knew this would be the last photo where I was their family failure, their well-meaning disappointment, their case study in unrealized potential. After Mom finished with the camera, as people began gathering their coats and preparing to leave, Vanessa approached me with an envelope. "I almost forgot," she said, pressing it into my hands. "Preston and I wanted to give you something special for Christmas." I opened the envelope, expecting maybe a gift card or a check. Instead, I found a brochure for Riverside Community College and a handwritten note. "It's never too late to start over. We believe in you. Love, Vanessa and Preston." The brochure featured smiling adults in classrooms, learning new skills, beginning new careers. The tagline read, "Transform your future. Start today." "We thought you might be interested in their business program," Vanessa explained, her voice gentle and encouraging. "Preston knows someone on the admissions board. He could put in a word for you." I stared at the brochure, at those hopeful faces of people reinventing themselves, and felt something crack inside my chest. This was how my family saw me, as someone who needed to start over, someone whose current life was so inadequate that community college classes were the best hope for redemption. "That's very thoughtful," I managed to say, though the words felt like gravel in my throat. "We just want you to be happy," Vanessa said, and I could tell she meant it. That was the worst part. This wasn't coming from malice or cruelty. This was coming from love, from genuine concern for my well-being. They really believed that serving coffee was the extent of my capabilities. They really thought that community college classes were the solution to my lack of ambition. They really saw me as someone who needed their guidance to find my way in the world. As I watched my family leave that night, hugging goodbye and making plans for New Year's Eve celebrations that I wouldn't be invited to because I'd probably be working, I clutched that community college brochure in my hand like evidence of their complete misunderstanding of who I was. Tomorrow, when Vincent Torino Jr. was arrested for racketeering and money laundering, when Maria Santos was charged with operating an illegal financial enterprise, when Danny the Fish Marconi was taken into custody for weapons trafficking, my family would learn that their disappointment had been the key to bringing down an entire criminal organization. But tonight, I went to bed in my childhood bedroom, surrounded by participation trophies and faded posters, holding a brochure that represented everything my family thought I could aspire to become. I couldn't sleep that night. At 2:47 a.m., I was still staring at the ceiling of my childhood bedroom, my mind racing between tomorrow's operation and the community college brochure sitting on my nightstand like a monument to my family's low expectations. The house was quiet, except for the familiar creaks of old wood settling and the distant hum of the furnace cycling on and off. My secure phone buzzed against my chest, where I kept it hidden under my pajama top. Another message from Agent Morrison. "Need to talk. Secure line. Now."
I slipped out of bed, grabbed my robe, and crept down the hallway to the guest bathroom where I could lock the door and whisper without waking anyone. The tile floor was cold against my bare feet as I dialed the encrypted number Morrison had given me 3 years ago. Agent Hartwell? Morrison's gravelly voice came through the speaker immediately. He never slept much during active operations. We've got a problem. My stomach dropped. What kind of problem? The kind that makes me question whether someone's been feeding information to the Torino family. His voice was tight with controlled anger. 3 hours ago, Vincent Jr. moved a scheduled meeting. Maria Santos canceled her regular Thursday money run. Danny Marconi suddenly decided to visit his sick aunt in Florida. I felt ice water flood my veins. They're scattering. Like rats from a sinking ship, someone tipped them off, Hartwell. Someone with inside knowledge of our timeline. That's impossible, I whispered, gripping the phone tighter. Morrison, the only people who knew about tomorrow were you, me, Agent Foster, and Agent Chen, and Director Walsh. And whoever any of us might have told. Morrison's pause was heavy with implication. I need you to think very carefully. Have you told anyone, anyone at all? Family member who asked too many questions? Friend who got suspicious about your job? No, the word came out sharper than I intended. Morrison, I've been deep cover for 3 years. I haven't broken protocol once. Then explain to me how Vincent Jr. suddenly developed the flu and decided to close the grindhouse for the week. Explain to me how Maria Santos moved her cash drop to a location we've never seen before. Explain to me how our entire operation just went sideways. I sank down on the edge of the bathtub, my legs suddenly unable to support me. 3 years of work, 3 years of careful relationship building, 3 years of gathering evidence that would put these people away for decades, all of it potentially compromised. Maybe they just got spooked, I suggested, though I didn't believe it myself. Maybe someone noticed something. Hartwell, Morrison's voice cut me off. Vincent Jr. called his lawyer tonight. His lawyer called a bail bondsman. These people aren't spooked. They're prepared. The bathroom walls seem to be closing in around me. If the Torino family knew about the investigation, they'd know about me too. They'd know that their friendly neighborhood barista had been recording their conversations and documenting their criminal activities for the FBI. Am I blown? I asked, though I was afraid of the answer. We don't know yet, but we're pulling you out tonight. There's a safe house in Clearwater Springs, about 3 hours north. Agent Foster is already en route to extract you. Morrison, wait. My mind was reeling, trying to process the implications. If someone leaked information about the timeline, they might have leaked information about me, too, about my real identity. That's exactly what we're worried about.
Then my family... I stopped, the words sticking in my throat. Morrison, if the Torino family knows who I am, they know where I live. They know about my parents, my sister. There was a long silence on the other end of the line. When Morrison spoke again, his voice was gentler. We're working on protection details for your family. But Hartwell, I need you to understand something. If there's been a leak, if your cover is blown, everyone you've been in contact with for the past 3 years is potentially at risk. I thought about Vincent Jr.'s casual conversations about people who had crossed his family. I thought about the stories Danny Marconi told about problem solving, and Maria Santos's cold eyes when she talked about cleaning up loose ends. These weren't people who forgave and forgot. These were people who eliminated threats. How long do I have? I whispered. Foster will be there in 90 minutes. Pack light, only essentials. And Hartwell? Morrison paused. Don't tell your family anything. Not yet. We don't know who we can trust. The line went dead, leaving me sitting in my childhood bathroom at 3 a.m, staring at my reflection in the mirror across from the tub. The woman looking back at me was a stranger. Someone who'd spent 3 years lying to everyone she loved. Someone whose dedication to justice might have just put her entire family in danger.
I thought about Vincent Jr.'s casual conversations about people who had crossed his family. I thought about the stories Danny Marconi told about problem solving, and Maria Santos's cold eyes when she talked about cleaning up loose ends. These weren't people who forgave and forgot. These were people who eliminated threats. I crept back to my bedroom and pulled out the small duffel bag I'd kept hidden in the back of my closet. It contained my real identification, backup credit cards, emergency cash, and a 9mm Glock that I'd never had to use in 3 years of undercover work. As I packed, my hands moved automatically through the routine I'd practiced but hoped never to need. Change of clothes, toiletries, secure phone and charger, ammunition. The small photo of my family from last Christmas, the one where I was actually in the frame, smiling and happy, and blissfully unaware that it might be the last normal family photo we'd ever take. I was sealing the bag when I heard footsteps in the hallway. Soft, careful footsteps that stopped right outside my door. "Riley?" Vanessa's voice was barely audible through the wood. "Are you awake?" My heart hammered against my ribs. I shoved the duffel bag under my bed and tried to make my voice sound sleepy. "Yeah, just couldn't sleep. Can I come in?" I opened the door to find Vanessa standing in the hallway wearing silk pajamas and a concerned expression. In the dim light from the hallway nightlight, she looked younger, more like the sister I remembered from childhood than the successful lawyer who'd been dissecting my life choices all evening. "I heard you moving around, and then I thought I heard you talking to someone." Ice flooded my veins. Talking to someone? Maybe on the phone? "I know it's late, but..." She sat down on the edge of my bed, right above where my go bag was hidden. "Riley, I wanted to apologize about tonight, about the photo thing and the brochure and everything." I stared at her, trying to process this unexpected vulnerability. "Vanessa, it's fine." "No, it's not fine." She looked down at her hands, fidgeting with her engagement ring. "I've been thinking about what Preston said earlier, about family supporting each other, and I realized that maybe I haven't been very supportive lately." This was the last conversation I wanted to have right now, with Agent Foster en route and my cover potentially blown and my family possibly in danger because of choices I'd made. But I also realized this might be the last conversation I'd have with my sister for a very long time. "You want what's best for me," I said carefully. "I know that." "Do I?" Vanessa looked up at me, and I was surprised to see genuine doubt in her eyes. "Or do I just want you to be successful in ways that make sense to me, ways that reflect well on our family?" Before I could answer, she continued, "I was thinking about when we were kids, remember? You always had these elaborate plans for solving mysteries and catching bad guys. You used to say you were going to work for the FBI someday." My blood went cold. "That was just kid stuff." "Was it?" Vanessa studied my face in the dim light. "Because tonight, watching you during dinner, you seemed different. Not upset about our teasing exactly, more like you were somewhere else entirely, like you had secrets." Every instinct I'd developed over 3 years of undercover work was screaming danger. Vanessa was too perceptive, asking too many questions, getting too close to the truth at the worst possible time. "I think you're overthinking this," I said, forcing a laugh. But Vanessa wasn't letting it go. She leaned forward, her lawyer instincts fully engaged now. "Riley, when you got that text during the photo session, you went completely white. That wasn't a work text about coffee shop scheduling. That was something serious." My secure phone buzzed again at my chest, probably Foster with an update on extraction timing. I couldn't check it with Vanessa sitting 3 feet away, watching my every reaction. "And another thing," Vanessa continued, warming to her theory. "Your hands. During dinner, when Uncle Richard was asking about your job, your hands stayed completely motionless. Most people fidget when they're lying or uncomfortable, but your hands were absolutely motionless, like you'd trained yourself to not show any nervous tells." The observation was so accurate, it took my breath away. She was right. 3 years of FBI training had taught me to control my physical responses, to keep my hands steady no matter what was happening around me. "Vanessa," I started, but she held up a hand to stop me. "I know this sounds crazy," she said, her voice dropping to barely above a whisper. "But I've been wondering if maybe you're not really working at a coffee shop. Maybe you're working somewhere that requires security clearance, or confidentiality agreements, or other kinds of training." She was too close, dangerously close. And I had 45 minutes before Agent Foster arrived to extract me from a situation that was spiraling out of control. "I think you should go back to bed," I said, standing up and moving toward the door. "It's late, and you have a long drive back to the city tomorrow." But Vanessa didn't move. She sat on my bed, studying me with the same intensity she probably brought to cross-examining witnesses in court. "One more thing," she said, quietly. "When you said you were fine earlier, when everyone was giving you career advice, you said it with absolute confidence. Not the kind of confidence someone has when they're trying to convince themselves everything's okay. The kind of confidence someone has when they know something everyone else doesn't." My secure phone buzzed again more intensely. Somewhere in the distance, I thought I heard a car engine. Too early to be Foster, but my nerves were so shot that I was jumping at every sound. "Riley," Vanessa said, standing up and moving toward me. "What aren't you telling us?" I stared at my sister standing in my childhood bedroom at 3 a.m, asking the one question I couldn't answer. The weight of 3 years of lies hung between us like a loaded gun, and I could feel everything I'd built, both the case and my family relationships, crumbling around me. "Vanessa," I said carefully, "you're imagining things. I know tonight was difficult."
My secure phone buzzed again, this time with the emergency pattern. 3 short bursts that meant immediate danger. My blood turned to ice water. "Your phone keeps buzzing," Vanessa observed, her lawyer's eyes missing nothing. "That's the 3rd time in 5 minutes, at 3 a.m. I reached for the first lie that came to mind. "It's probably just—" The sound of gravel crunching in our driveway cut me off. A car was pulling up to the house, headlights sweeping across my bedroom window. Too early to be Foster, which meant— "Are you expecting someone?" Vanessa asked, moving to peer out the window. I pushed past her and looked down to see a black sedan idling in our driveway, exhaust visible in the cold December air. 2 figures sat in the front seats, but I couldn't make out faces in the darkness. Every instinct I developed over 3 years of undercover work was screaming that this was wrong, all wrong. My phone buzzed with a text message, not from the secure line, from my regular phone, the one Vincent Torino Jr. had programmed his number into months ago. The message was simple. "Time for that conversation we discussed. Come outside. Your family stays inside." The world tilted sideways. They knew. The Torino family knew exactly who I was and exactly where to find me, and they were sitting in my parents' driveway at 3 a.m. on Christmas night. "Riley," Vanessa whispered, reading over my shoulder. "What conversation? Who is Vincent Torino?" I spun around to face her, my mind racing through impossible calculations. Foster was still 30 minutes away. My parents were asleep down the hall. My sister was standing 3 feet away from me, completely unaware that her life had just been put in mortal danger because of choices I had made. "Vanessa, listen to me very carefully," I said, grabbing her shoulders. "I need you to go wake up Mom and Dad. Tell them to pack a bag immediately, just essentials. Tell them we're all leaving, right now." "What are you talking about?" But something in my voice must have convinced her that this wasn't a joke, because her face went pale. "Riley, who are those people in the driveway? I can't explain right now, but they're dangerous, very dangerous, and they're here because of me." Vanessa stared at me like she was seeing me for the first time. "Because of you? Riley, what have you done?" The question hung in the air like an accusation. What had I done? I'd spent 3 years building a federal case against organized crime. I'd gathered evidence that would put killers and drug dealers behind bars. I'd served my country and protected innocent people from predators who saw violence as just another business tool. But I'd also lied to everyone I loved for 3 years. I'd put my family in danger without their knowledge or consent. I'd made them complicit in my deceptions simply by existing in their lives. It's not what I've done, it's who I am, who I really am. My phone buzzed again. This time it was the secure line.
Foster's voice came through in clipped, urgent tones. Hartwell, we've got multiple vehicles moving toward your location. Unknown hostiles. Do not, repeat, do not engage. Lock down and wait for backup. Too late for that, I whispered into the phone, watching the sedan's doors open in the driveway below. Vanessa grabbed my arm. Riley, talk to me. What is happening? I looked at my sister, really looked at her perfectly styled hair and her expensive silk pajamas and her engagement ring that caught the light from the hallway, at everything she had built based on rules and expectations and playing by the book, at everything she was about to lose because her sister had chosen to live in the shadows. My name is Riley Hartwell, but for the past 3 years, I've been Agent Hartwell, FBI Financial Crimes Division. I've been working undercover to build a case against the Torino crime family. Those men downstairs are here because someone leaked information about our investigation, and now they know who I really am. Vanessa's face went through a series of expressions: confusion, disbelief, shock, and finally a kind of dawning horror as the implications hit her. FBI? She whispered. You're FBI? The coffee shop is a front. The customers I serve every day are members of organized crime. For 3 years, I've been gathering evidence of money laundering, racketeering, drug trafficking, and murder. And now they know, which means everyone I love is in danger. This is insane! But she was already moving toward the door. This can't be real! Go wake up Mom and Dad, I ordered, checking the clip in my Glock. Tell them we have 5 minutes to get out of this house before very bad people come looking for me. Vanessa hesitated at the doorway, staring at the gun in my hands like it was a snake. Riley, I don't understand. Why didn't you tell us? Why didn't you trust us? The question hit me like a physical blow. Why hadn't I trusted them? Because I'd been trained not to. Because compartmentalization was the foundation of undercover work. Because the fewer people who knew the truth, the safer everyone was supposed to be. Except it hadn't kept anyone safe. It had just kept them ignorant while danger circled closer. Because this is what happens when people know, I said, gesturing toward the window where I could now see 3 men walking up our front walkway. Because the people I've been investigating don't just go after agents, they go after families. They go after everyone you've ever cared about. Vanessa was already out the door, her footsteps quick and light down the hallway toward our parents' bedroom. I could hear her voice, urgent and frightened. Mom! Dad, wake up! We have to leave, right now! My secure phone rang. Foster again. Hartwell, backup is 15 minutes out. Can you hold your position? Negative, I whispered into the phone, watching the men approach our front door. I've got family in the house, 3 civilians who don't know how to handle this situation. Then you get them out. Back exit if you have one. Move to the extraction point on Maple Street, 2 blocks north. We'll meet you there. I could hear my parents' voices now, confused and alarmed. Mom asking what was wrong, Dad demanding to know what was happening, the sound of dresser drawers opening and closing as they tried to process Vanessa's urgent instructions. A knock came at the front door. Not the aggressive pounding I might have expected, but a polite, almost gentle knock, the kind neighbors make when they need to borrow sugar or report a missing cat. Mrs. Hartwell? A voice called out from outside, smooth and professional. FBI, we need to speak with your daughter Riley about an ongoing investigation. My blood froze. They were impersonating federal agents, which meant they were either confident enough in their plan to risk federal charges for impersonation, or they were planning to make sure no one survived to report the impersonation. I crept down the hallway to find my parents in their bedroom doorway, looking utterly bewildered while Vanessa tried to stuff clothes into a suitcase.
There are men outside claiming to be FBI, I whispered. They're not. We're leaving through the back door, right now. Dad stared at me, his professor's mind struggling to process information that didn't fit any logical framework. Riley, what? The coffee shop was a cover, I said, cutting him off. I'm a federal agent. I've been undercover for 3 years. The case has been compromised, and now we're all in danger. The knock came again, more insistent this time. Mrs. Hartwell, we know you're home. We just need a few minutes of your time. Mom looked from me to Vanessa to Dad, her face cycling through the same disbelief I'd seen on Vanessa's face minutes earlier. This is some kind of joke, she said finally. This can't be real. It's real, I said, moving to the back bedroom window that overlooked our garden. It would hold our weight, barely, but it was our only option. Follow me, I said, swinging my leg over the windowsill. Stay quiet, stay low, and do exactly what I say. As I helped my family climb down into the December cold, leaving behind the house where I'd grown up and the life they thought they knew, I realized that everything had changed in the space of an hour. I was no longer their disappointing daughter who served coffee and had unrealized potential. I was the person who had shattered their safe, predictable world and dragged them into a nightmare they never chose to be part of. The person I'd been for 3 years, Riley the underachiever, Riley the family project, Riley who needed career guidance and community college brochures, was dead. She died the moment Vincent Torino Jr. sent that text message. Now there was only Agent Hartwell, trying desperately to keep her family alive long enough to get them to safety. 6 months later, I was washing dishes in a roadside diner called Mel's Place in the middle of nowhere, Montana, watching steam rise from soapy water while my hands moved in the same repetitive motion I'd been perfecting since dawn. The Federal Witness Protection Program had relocated us to Bitterroot Falls, population 847, where the closest thing to organized crime was Mrs. Henderson's illegal poker game in her church basement every Thursday night. My name was now Sarah Collins. My family had been scattered to different locations for their safety, mom and dad to a retirement community in Oregon under the names Patricia and James Newsome, Vanessa to a small law firm in Vermont where she worked as Victoria Nash. We weren't allowed contact for the first year, not until the trials were over and the threats had been assessed and neutralized. So I washed dishes at Mel's Place and tried not to think about the fact that everything I'd worked for during 3 years of undercover operations had been worth exactly nothing. The Torino case had collapsed spectacularly. The leak had come from someone high up in the FBI's Organized Crime Division, an assistant director named Harold Brennan, who'd been feeding information to the Torino family for over 2 years. By the time they'd discovered the betrayal, Vincent Jr. had fled to a non-extradition country, Maria Santos had disappeared with $40 million in laundered money, and Danny the Fish Marconi had died in what appeared to be a car accident, but was almost certainly an execution designed to eliminate a potential witness. 3 years of my life. 3 years of evidence gathering, relationship building, careful documentation of criminal activities. All of it compromised by someone who sold out federal agents for monthly payments that probably didn't even cover his mortgage. Harold Brennan was now serving 25 to life in a federal supermax prison. The Torino family was still operating freely somewhere in South America. And I was scrubbing grease off plates in a town so small it didn't even have a stoplight. "Sarah!" Mel called from behind the grill, his voice carrying over the sizzle of bacon and the hum of the overhead fams. "Table 6 needs a coffee refill when you get a chance." Mel Kowalski was 63 years old, had run the Steiner since 1987, and asked exactly 0 questions about anyone's past. When I walked in 6 months ago looking for work, he took one look at my hands, calloused 3 years of operating espresso machines and carrying coffee trays, and hired me on the spot. "Those are working hands," he said. "I don't care where you worked before or why you're here now. You want to work? I need the help." It was the kind of honesty I'd forgotten existed. No background checks, no references, no complicated explanations about gaps in employment history. Just, can you show up on time? Can you do the job? Do you need the money? Yes, yes, and desperately. I dried my hands on the dish towel tied around my waist and grabbed the coffee pot. Table 6 was occupied by Tom Martinez, who drove long-haul trucks and stopped at Mills every Tuesday on his route from Seattle to Denver. He'd been coming in for so long that Mel just started his usual order, eggs over easy, wheat toast, hash browns, the moment Tom's 18-wheeler pulled into the parking lot. "How's the road treating you, Tom?" I asked, filling his mug with coffee that was strong enough to wake the dead. "Can't complain," Tom said, adding cream until his coffee turned the color of caramel. "Though I heard there's construction backing up traffic near Spokane. Might have to take the southern route next week." This was the extent of my current social interaction. Weather, road conditions, and whether the breakfast special was worth ordering. No elaborate criminal conspiracies, no coded conversations about money laundering, no pretending to be charmed by stories about violence and intimidation. Just regular people, living regular lives, worried about regular things like traffic jams and whether their coffee was hot enough.
In the evening, after my shift ended at 6, I walked the 8 blocks to my apartment above Murphy's hardware store. 800 square feet, 1 bedroom, a kitchen that consisted of a 2-burner stove and a refrigerator that hummed like a dying engine. The rent was $400 a month, which was exactly what I could afford on dishwasher wages. No federal salary, no government benefits, no expense account or backup team or state-of-the-art surveillance equipment. Just whatever I could earn with my hands and whatever I could save by buying generic groceries and learning to cook meals that cost less than $5. But there was something unexpectedly liberating about the simplicity. When I came home at night, I wasn't analyzing conversations for criminal intent or documenting suspicious activities or wondering whether the person I'd served coffee to that morning was planning to kill someone that afternoon. I was just tired from an honest day's work, ready to heat up a can of soup and watch whatever was playing on the 13-inch television that came with the apartment. My neighbor across the hall was Mrs. Dorothy Chen, an 80-year-old widow who'd taught elementary school for 47 years before retiring. She had a habit of leaving homemade cookies outside my door with little notes. "Thought you might enjoy these after a long day at work." Or, "Chocolate chip cookies always make Tuesday better." The first time she'd done it, I'd nearly called Agent Foster to report suspicious behavior. 3 years of paranoia had trained me to see threats everywhere, to assume that kindness was always a manipulation tactic, that people who wanted to be friendly were probably gathering intelligence. But Mrs. Chen just missed having someone to bake for. Her husband had died 3 years earlier, her children lived on the other side of the country, and she'd discovered that cookies tasted better when they were shared.
So I started accepting her offerings and eventually started knocking on her door to return the plates with genuine thanks. We'd talk about the weather, about the new family that had moved in downstairs, about whether the hardware store was really going out of business like everyone said. Normal conversations, the kind I'd forgotten how to have. 2 months into my residency in Bitterroot Falls, Mrs. Chen had asked if I wanted to help her with her computer. Her granddaughter had given her a laptop for Christmas, but she couldn't figure out how to use email. "I know you young people understand these things," she'd said, looking at the laptop like it might bite her. Young people. At 32, after 3 years of federal undercover work and 6 months of living under an assumed identity, being called a young person by someone who remembered when television was a novelty felt like receiving an unexpected gift. I'd spent the next hour showing Mrs. Chen how to check email, how to attach photos, how to video call her family in California. Her face when she successfully sent her first message was brighter than any commendation I'd ever received from the FBI. "This is amazing," she said, staring at the screen where her granddaughter's reply had already appeared. "I can talk to Emma anytime I want." That night, I realized something that 3 years of federal training had never taught me. There was dignity in helping people with small problems. There was value in making someone's day slightly better through simple acts of kindness. The FBI had trained me to think in terms of cases and arrests, evidence and prosecutions. Success was measured in convictions and sentences, in how many criminals you could put behind bars and how many criminal organizations you could dismantle. But here in Bitterroot Falls, success looked different. It looked like Tom Martinez trusting you to pour his coffee just the way he liked it. It looked like Mrs. Chen being able to see her granddaughter smile over a video call. It looked like Mel knowing he could count on you to show up on time and work hard without drama or complications. It wasn't the kind of success that would impress my family. There were no news articles about heroic dishwashers, no awards for excellence in coffee service, no prestigious titles that looked good on Christmas cards. But when I walked home through the quiet streets of Bitterroot Falls each evening, past houses where families were sitting down to dinner and children were playing in front yards, I felt something I hadn't experienced in years: peace. The kind of peace that comes from knowing exactly who you are and exactly where you stand. No false identities, no cover stories, no elaborate deceptions designed to win the trust of dangerous people. Just Sarah Collins, who washed dishes for a living and helped elderly neighbors with their computers, and had learned that sometimes the most important work you can do is the kind that nobody will ever put in a case file or mention in a federal report. The work of being genuinely,
Simply, honestly human. The call that changed everything came on a Tuesday morning in October, 8 months after I'd arrived in Bitterroot Falls. I was prepping vegetables for the lunch rush when Mel's landline rang, the old rotary phone that hung on the wall next to the walk-in freezer, its ring sharp and insistent in the morning quiet. Mel's place? I answered, tucking the receiver between my shoulder and ear while I continued dicing onions. Is this Sarah Collins? The voice was unfamiliar, professional, with the carefully modulated tone of someone accustomed to delivering difficult news. My blood went cold. In witness protection, unexpected phone calls asking for you by name were never good news. Who's asking? My name is Detective Laura Reeves, Montana State Police. I'm calling about Mrs. Dorothy Chen. You're listed as her emergency contact. The knife slipped from my hand, clattering against the cutting board. Mrs. Chen had put me down as her emergency contact? When did she down that? And why? Is she okay? I asked, though something in Detective Reeves' tone already told me the answer. Mrs. Chen is in the hospital. She was assaulted in her apartment last night. The doctors say she's stable, but Detective Reeves paused. Ms. Collins, she's been asking for you. She says there's something important she needs to tell you about what happened. 20 minutes later, I was walking through the automatic doors of Bitterroot Falls General Hospital, still wearing my Mel's Place apron and smelling like coffee and bacon grease. The hospital was small, more like a large clinic than the medical centers I was used to from my previous life, but clean and efficient. Mrs. Chen was in room 204, looking impossibly small against the white hospital sheets. Her left eye was swollen shut, her lip was split, and there were finger-shaped bruises around her throat. But when she saw me, she managed a smile that made my heart crack. "Sarah, dear," she whispered, her voice hoarse and strained. "I was hoping you'd come." I pulled a chair close to her bed, careful not to disturb the IV lines. "Mrs. Chen, what happened? Who did this to you?" She reached for my hand with fingers that trembled slightly. "Two men came to my apartment last night. They said they were looking for someone named Riley Hartwell. They had pictures, Sarah. Pictures of a young woman who looked very much like you." The world tilted sideways. After 8 months of peace, of simple work and genuine human connection, my past had found me in this tiny Montana town. But how? And why were they targeting Mrs. Chen? "They wanted to know if I'd seen this Riley person," Mrs. Chen continued, her voice getting stronger as she talked. "They showed me the pictures, and I told them I'd never seen her before. That seemed to make them angry." "Mrs. Chen," I said carefully, "did they say why they were looking for this person?" "Something about money. A lot of money that was supposed to be recovered but went missing instead." She squeezed my hand. "Sarah, I may be old, but I'm not stupid. Those pictures looked exactly like you, just with different hair." I stared at this woman who'd shown me nothing but kindness for 8 months, who'd shared cookies and computer lessons and stories about her 47 years of teaching children. She'd been hurt because of me, because of choices I made and a life I'd tried to leave behind. "I'm so sorry," I whispered, but she shook her head. "Don't apologize, dear. Just tell me the truth. Are you Riley Hartwell?" For 8 months, I'd been Sarah Collins, dishwasher, neighbor, helper with computer problems. Simple, uncomplicated, safe. But looking at Mrs. Chen's bruised face, I realized that my attempt at a simple life had made her a target. "Yes," I said quietly. "I'm Riley Hartwell, and I think I know why those men were looking for me." Over the next hour, I told Mrs. Chen everything. About the FBI, about 3 years undercover, about the Torino family and the case that had been destroyed by a corrupt federal agent, about witness protection and assumed identities, and the $40 million that Maria Santos had stolen when she disappeared. Mrs. Chen listened without interruption, her teacher's instincts recognizing the importance of letting someone tell their complete story before asking questions. "So, you think these men believe you know where this Maria Santos woman is?" she asked when I finished. "Either that or they think I helped her steal the money." I ran my hands through my hair, trying to think. "Mrs. Chen, they're going to keep looking, and they're going to keep hurting people who might have information about me.
Then we need to stop them. I looked at her, this 80-year-old woman with a split lip and a black eye, talking about stopping dangerous criminals like she was discussing a particularly challenging lesson plan. We need to call the police, I said. Get you protection. Get me transferred to a new location. Sarah, Riley, whoever you are, Mrs. Chen interrupted, struggling to sit up straighter in her hospital bed. I taught elementary school for 47 years. Do you know what that teaches you about bullies? I shook my head. It teaches you that running away just makes them bolder. It teaches you that the only way to stop a bully is to stand up to them, with help from people who care about what's right. Before I could respond, Detective Reeves appeared in the doorway. She was younger than I'd expected from her voice, maybe mid-30s, with the kind of alert, intelligent eyes that missed very little. "Miss Collins," she said, stepping into the room, "I was hoping to speak with you about last night's incident." Mrs. Chen squeezed my hand. "Tell her the truth, dear. All of it." So I did. For the second time in an hour, I told my story, but this time to a law enforcement officer who had the authority to do something about it. Detective Reeves listened with the focused attention of someone trained to evaluate credibility and assess threats. "You're telling me that you are a federal agent in witness protection and that organized crime figures are now operating in my jurisdiction?" she asked when I finished. "Former federal agent," I corrected. "And yes, that's exactly what I'm telling you." Detective Reeves was quiet for a long moment, studying my face. "I'm going to need to verify your story with the U.S. Marshals Service, but assuming everything checks out, we have a problem. A big problem." "What kind of problem?" "The kind where dangerous criminals are targeting innocent civilians in my town to get to you." She pulled out a notebook and pen. "Miss Hartwell, I need you to tell me everything you know about these people and why they think you can lead them to Maria Santos." "Because I can," I said quietly. Both women stared at me. During my undercover work, I documented all of Maria Santos's financial transactions, every shell company, every bank account, every money transfer. The FBI assumed all that information was compromised when Harold Brennan was exposed as the leak, but they were wrong. I reached into my pocket and pulled out a small thumb drive that I'd been carrying around for 8 months, the one piece of my former life that I'd been unable to throw away. I made backup copies of everything before the case collapsed: transaction records, account numbers, routing information, everything needed to track down Maria Santos and recover the stolen money. The Bureau doesn't know I have this because I created the backups through unofficial channels. Detective Reeves stared at the thumb drive like it was a live grenade. "And you've been carrying this around for 8 months? Why exactly?" "Because I knew someday I might need leverage. Because I knew that as long as Maria Santos was free with that money, the people she hurt would never get justice." Mrs. Chen smiled despite her injuries. "So we're gonna get her, aren't we? We're gonna stop these bullies once and for all." I looked from my elderly neighbor to the small-town detective, both of them looking at me with the kind of faith and determination I hadn't seen since my FBI Academy days. These weren't trained federal agents or seasoned investigators. These were just good people who believed in doing the right thing, regardless of the personal cost. "Yes," I said, feeling something that had been dormant for 8 months suddenly roaring back to life. "We're going to get her. All of them." For the first time since I'd arrived in Bitterroot Falls, I wasn't running from my past anymore. I was about to use everything I'd learned as Agent Riley Hartwell to protect the simple, honest life I'd built as Sarah Collins. And this time, I wasn't going to let the bad guys win. The plan came together over the next 72 hours like pieces of a puzzle I'd been unconsciously assembling for 8 months. Detective Reeves had confirmed my identity with the U.S. Marshals Service, who were initially furious that I'd been carrying classified evidence without authorization, then grudgingly impressed when they realized what I'd managed to preserve. Agent Foster flew in from Seattle looking exactly as I remembered him: tall, perpetually tired, and carrying the weight of too many cases gone wrong. He sat across from me in the Bitterroot Falls Police Station's one interrogation room, which doubled as a storage closet for Christmas decorations, and shook his head in disbelief. "Hartwell, when you disappeared from the Safe House program,
We assumed you'd either been compromised or had decided to go completely off-grid. We never imagined you were washing dishes in Montana while sitting on the key to Maria Santos's entire financial network. I needed time to think, I said, to figure out what came next after everything fell apart. And what comes next is we use this information to track down Santos and the stolen money, Detective Reeves interjected from her position by the window, before anyone else gets hurt. Foster nodded grimly. The problem is that Santos isn't just hiding, she's actively hunting. Intelligence suggests that she's been systematically eliminating anyone who might be able to connect her to the stolen funds. 3 former Torino associates have died in the past 6 months, all made to look like accidents. So she's cleaning house, making sure there are no loose ends that could lead back to her. Exactly. And according to our analysis of the financial records you've provided, you're the biggest loose end of all. You're the only person outside her inner circle who understands the complete structure of her money laundering operation. Mrs. Chen, who'd insisted on being present despite her injuries, spoke up from her chair in the corner. So we use that to our advantage. We make her come to us instead of waiting for her to send more thugs to terrorize innocent people. Foster stared at the 80-year-old woman like she'd just suggested we rob a bank. Ma'am, with all due respect, this isn't a situation for civilian involvement. These are extremely dangerous individuals. Detective Reeves, Mrs. Chen interrupted, turning to address the local officer. How many violent crimes occurred in Bitterroot Falls last year? 3. 2 bar fights and someone's husband who got a little too enthusiastic during an argument about property lines. And how many federal agents do you have on staff? None. Mrs. Chen turned back to Foster with the satisfied expression of someone who'd just proven her point. Agent Foster, you have 2 choices. You can try to handle this through official channels, which will take months, and give Maria Santos plenty of time to disappear again, or you can work with the people who actually understand this community and can move quickly without bureaucratic approval.
What happened next was the most surreal strategy session of my career. In a room decorated with 4th of July bunting and boxes labeled Easter decorations, a federal agent, a small-town detective, a retired elementary school teacher, and a former undercover operative planned an operation to catch one of the most wanted financial criminals in the country. The strategy was elegant in its simplicity. Using the financial records I'd preserved, we would trace the money trail to Santos's current location. Then, instead of mounting a complex federal operation that she might detect and flee from, we would use Bitterroot Falls' isolation and close-knit community as advantages. She's expecting you to run or hide, Foster explained, as we reviewed satellite photos of Santos's suspected location, a luxury compound outside Billings, Montana, less than 200 miles from where we sat. She's not expecting you to go on the offensive in a town where everyone knows everyone else and strangers stick out like neon signs. Detective Reeves spread a map of the region across the table. If Santos wants to get to Riley, she'll have to come through Bitterroot Falls. And this town has exactly 3 ways in and 3 ways out. We can monitor all of them with the equipment Agent Foster is bringing in. What about backup? I asked. If this goes sideways, I'll have a tactical team positioned 30 minutes out, close enough to respond quickly, far enough away not to spook Santos into running. Mrs. Chen cleared her throat. And what exactly will my role be in this operation? Mrs. Chen, I started, but she held up a hand to stop me. That woman's people put me in the hospital because they thought I might have information about you. I think that entitled me to be involved in making sure she faces consequences for her actions. Foster looked uncomfortable. Ma'am, I appreciate your desire to help, but Mr. Foster, Mrs. Chen said, her voice taking on the tone she'd probably used with thousands of unruly students over the years, I taught elementary school for 47 years. Do you know what that requires? No, ma'am. It requires the ability to spot trouble before it starts, to stay calm under pressure, and to know when someone is lying to you. It also requires understanding that sometimes you have to take risks to protect the people you care about. She turned to look at me. Sarah, Riley, has been a good neighbor and a good friend. She helped me learn to use my computer so I could talk to my granddaughter.
She shoveled my sidewalk every time it snowed without being asked. She brought me soup when I had the flu and never made me feel like I was a burden. Her voice strengthened as she continued. I may be 80 years old, but I'm not helpless. And I'm certainly not going to sit in my apartment feeling afraid while good people risk their lives to stop bad people. The room fell silent. Finally, Detective Reeves spoke up. She could be useful as a lookout, she said thoughtfully. Mrs. Chen knows every person in this town. If strangers show up, she'll spot them immediately. Foster sighed, recognizing that he was outnumbered. Fine, but you follow orders exactly, and if things get dangerous, you get to safety. Understood? Mrs. Chen smiled. Understood. Over the next 2 days, Bitterroot Falls transformed into something resembling a military operation disguised as a sleepy Montana town. Foster's team installed surveillance equipment that looked like routine telephone maintenance. Detective Reeves coordinated with neighboring jurisdictions to monitor traffic patterns. Mrs. Chen recruited a network of elderly residents who suddenly became very interested in birdwatching, a hobby that required them to sit by their windows with binoculars and take detailed notes about anything unusual they observed. I resumed my normal routine at Mel's place, but now every customer interaction carried additional weight. Was that trucker who stopped for coffee really just passing through, or was he conducting surveillance? When 2 men in suits ordered breakfast and asked casual questions about local residents, were they federal agents or Santos's advance team? The answer came on Friday morning when Mrs. Chen called the diner's landline with a coded message we'd established. Sarah, dear, I think my roses might have aphids. Could you stop by after work to take a look? Aphids meant vehicles with out-of-state license plates. Multiple vehicles, based on the emphasis she'd put on the word roses. I hung up the phone and caught Mel's attention. I need to leave early today. Family emergency. Mel, who'd been briefed by Detective Reeves about potential trouble without being given specifics, just nodded. Go handle what you need to handle, Sarah. We'll manage here. As I walked the 8 blocks from Mel's place to Murphy's hardware store, I could feel eyes watching me from multiple directions. Santos had arrived, just as we'd predicted. The question now was whether our small-town strategy would be enough to outsmart a criminal organization that had evaded federal law enforcement for 8 months. I climbed the stairs to my apartment, knowing that this would be the last time I walked these familiar steps as Sarah Collins. Tomorrow, regardless of what happened, everything would change again. But this time, I wasn't running away from my past. I was finally ready to confront it head-on with the help of people who'd shown me what real community looked like. The showdown that would determine whether Maria Santos faced justice or disappeared forever was about to begin in the unlikeliest of places. A town so small it didn't even have a stoplight, where everyone knew everyone else and good people looked out for each other. Exactly the kind of place where an 80-year-old retired teacher and a small-town detective could make all the difference in bringing down one of the country's most wanted criminals. The confrontation came at 3:17 p.m. on a crisp October afternoon, right in the middle of Main Street, in front of the entire town of Bitterroot Falls. Maria Santos arrived exactly as we'd predicted she would, arrogant, confident, and completely unprepared for what a determined community could accomplish when they decided to protect one of their own. I was sitting on the bench outside Murphy's hardware store, feeding pigeons, and looking for all the world like Sarah Collins, enjoying a quiet afternoon break when the black SUV pulled up to the curb. Maria Santos stepped out, looking exactly like her FBI photos, but somehow smaller in person. Mid-40s, expensively dressed, the kind of woman who'd learned to project authority through calculated intimidation. She walked directly toward me, flanked by 2 men who were obviously private security rather than federal agents. Professional muscle with barely concealed weapons and the swagger of people accustomed to getting their way through threat and violence. Riley Hartwell, Santos said, her voice carrying clearly in the afternoon air. We need to talk. I looked up from the pigeons, letting surprise and confusion cross my face. I'm sorry, I think you have me confused with someone else. My name is Sarah Collins. Santos smiled, but it didn't reach her eyes. $40 million, Riley. That's how much money the FBI thinks I stole when your investigation collapsed. They're wrong, of course. I only took $38 million. The other $2 million went to covering my tracks and ensuring certain federal agents stayed bought. She sat down on the bench beside me, close enough that her security couldn't be easily seen from surrounding buildings, but far enough away that anyone watching would think we were having a casual conversation.
Here's what's going to happen, she continued, her voice dropping to barely above a whisper. You're going to come with me quietly. We're going to have a conversation about what evidence you might have preserved and who you might have shared it with. And then, depending on how cooperative you are, you might even survive the experience. I fed another handful of breadcrumbs to the pigeons, watching them scatter and regroup with the kind of simple focus that suggested I was just a small-town woman trying to process an unexpected and frightening situation. I don't know what you're talking about, I said, my voice trembling just enough to sound genuine. I work at Mel's place. I wash dishes. I don't know anything about missing money or federal investigations. Of course you don't, Santos replied, just like you don't know that Agent Derek Morrison has been trying to contact you for 8 months, just like you don't know that Harold Brennan mentioned your name 17 times during his interrogation before he decided to stop cooperating with federal prosecutors. She leaned closer, and I could smell her expensive perfume mixed with something sharper, the metallic scent of someone who'd learned to enjoy other people's fear. The problem with witness protection, Riley, is that it only works if you actually disappear. But you've been leaving little traces everywhere. Employment records, medical visits, even a library card in your new name. Did you really think we wouldn't eventually connect Sarah Collins to Riley Hartwell? That's when I heard the sound I'd been waiting for, the soft click of Detective Reeves's radio coming to life from her position inside Murphy's hardware store. Mrs. Chen's voice, calm and clear despite her 80 years and recent injuries, spoke the words that meant our trap was ready to spring. All birds are in the nest. Repeat, all birds are in the nest. It was Mrs. Chen's way of confirming that Santos's entire team was now positioned exactly where we wanted them. The 2 men flanking our bench, the driver still in the SUV, the 4th team member positioned at the corner of Main and 2nd Street. All of them isolated from each other, all of them missable to multiple surveillance positions. I stood up slowly, brushing breadcrumbs off my jeans. You know what, Maria? You're absolutely right. I am Riley Hartwell. Santos's satisfied smile faltered slightly. Something in my tone had shifted, and people who'd survived as long as she had in criminal organizations learned to pay attention to tonal changes. And you're right that I've been leaving traces, I continued, reaching into my jacket pocket, but not accidentally. I pulled out a small recording device, the same model I'd used during 3 years of undercover operations with the Torino family. I've been documenting every attempt you've made to find me, every person you've threatened, every law you've broken in your quest to eliminate the one witness who can connect you to $38 million in stolen federal recovery funds. Santos was on her feet now, her composure cracking. That's not admissible. Illegal recording without consent. We're in Montana, Detective Reeves said, stepping out of Murphy's hardware store with her weapon drawn, but pointed safely downward. One-party consent state, which means Agent Hartwell is perfectly within her rights to record conversations she's participating in. At the same moment, Agent Foster emerged from Mel's place across the street, flanked by 2 tactical officers who'd been posing as health inspectors for the past 2 days. Mrs. Chen appeared at her bedroom window above the hardware store, giving a cheerful wave to the people gathering on the street below. "Maria Santos," he called out, his voice carrying the authority of someone who'd been waiting 8 months for this moment. "You are under arrest for money laundering, racketeering,
conspiracy to commit murder, and about 15 other federal charges that we'll discuss in detail during your very long stay in federal prison. Santos looked around frantically, finally realizing that her careful plan had walked directly into a trap orchestrated by a dishwasher, a small-town detective, and a retired elementary school teacher. "This is impossible," she said, but her security team was already surrendering their weapons to federal agents who seemed to materialize from every storefront on Main Street. "You know what your mistake was?" I asked, stepping closer to the woman who'd spent 8 months hunting me. "You assumed that because I was washing dishes in a small town, I'd forgotten how to be an agent. You assumed that because these people seemed simple and trusting, they couldn't handle complex operations." I gestured toward the crowd that had gathered to watch the arrests. Tom Martinez, the truck driver, Mel from the diner, the librarian, the post worker, dozens of people who'd become part of my life over 8 months of simple, honest living. "But you were wrong about it all. I didn't forget how to be an agent. I learned how to be a better one by understanding what I was actually fighting for. And these people aren't simple. They're just decent, which is something you never learned to recognize." Santos was handcuffed and being read her rights, but she managed one last venomous look in my direction. "You think this ends anything? There are others. There are always others." "Maybe, but they'll have to get through Mrs. Chen first. And trust me, you don't want to underestimate an 80-year-old woman who spent 47 years dealing with difficult children." Mrs. Chen's laughter carried down from her window, followed by applause from the crowd that had gathered to watch justice finally being served. 3 hours later, after statements had been given and paperwork had been filed, and federal agents had departed with their prisoners, I found myself back at Mel's place, wearing my apron and washing dishes like it was any other day. Except it wasn't any other day. For the first time in over 3 years, I wasn't living a lie. I wasn't pretending to be someone else or hiding my true identity or measuring every word for its potential impact on an ongoing investigation. I was Riley Hartwell, former FBI agent, current dishwasher, and permanent resident of Bitterroot Falls, Montana, population 847, plus one federal witness who'd learned that sometimes the most important cases were solved not through elaborate undercover operations, but through the simple act of good people deciding to protect each other. My secure phone, the one I'd carried for months without using, finally rang with the call I'd been expecting. Agent Morrison's voice came through clear and professional. "Agent Hartwell, I'm calling to inform you that Maria Santos has agreed to a plea deal in exchange for information on the location of the stolen funds. Recovery operations begin tomorrow." "That's good news," I said, continuing to scrub plates while I talked. "It is. It also means your testimony won't be needed for trial, which means the witness protection restrictions have been lifted. You're free to resume contact with your family, free to return to federal service if you choose, free to reclaim your original identity." I looked around Mel's kitchen, at the ancient dishwasher that needed to be kicked twice before it would start, at the coffee stains on the walls that had been there so long that they'd become part of the decor, at the window that looked out onto Main Street, where Mrs. Chen was already back to her daily routine of people-watching from her apartment above the hardware store. "Agent Morrison," I said, "I appreciate the call, but I think I'm exactly where I need to be." That evening, my family called, all of them, in a conference call that Agent Foster had helped arrange. Mom and Dad from their retirement community in Oregon, Vanessa from her law firm in Vermont, all of them talking at once and crying and trying to process 8 months of separation and the news reports that they'd seen about the arrests.
"Riley," Vanessa said, her voice shaking with emotion, "I'm so sorry. About Christmas, about everything we said, about not understanding." "Vanessa," I interrupted gently, "you couldn't have understood. I made sure of that." "But we should have trusted you," Dad said. We should have known that you were building something important, even if we couldn't see what it was. You were right about one thing, though, I told them. I was figuring things out. It just took me a little longer than expected. We talked for 2 hours about the case and the arrests and their experiences in witness protection, but mostly we talked about the future, about the fact that they could visit me in Bitterwood Falls anytime they wanted, about how sometimes the most important work you can do is the kind that happens in small places with good people. When I finally hung up the phone, Mrs. Chen was knocking on my door with a plate of chocolate chip cookies and a smile that suggested she'd been listening to enough of the conversation to understand that everything was finally going to be okay. "So," she said, settling into my kitchen chair like she'd done dozens of times over the past 8 months, "I suppose you'll be leaving us now that your real life is calling." I looked at this woman who'd been beaten by criminals because she was my friend, who'd helped plan a federal operation from her hospital bed, who'd spent 47 years teaching children that standing up to bullies was always worth the risk. "Mrs. Chen, this is my real life. Everything that came before was just preparation for being exactly where I am right now." And for the first time and longer than I could remember, that was absolutely true.